Pastor Lewis, thank you so much for that encouragement. It was just beautiful, so poignant. Good morning. My name is Adam Peacocke. I'm very grateful to be here. I have heard amazing things about the Clergy Community Coalition. And now that I'm here in person, I believe them all. I'm so honored to have an opportunity to share with you this morning. As has already been shared, I am coming here from Sonoma County. I live in Santa Rosa, and as you see on the slide here, I want to talk about companioning fire survivors with competence and compassion. That sounds like a nice title. Maybe I need to be a little more direct. I want to focus a little bit in regards to long-term recovery from devastating disaster. And what I want to talk about this morning is how do we move from just getting people help to getting people home? How do we move from just getting people help to getting people home? Part of why I'm here is because my community experienced devastating wildfire. My life changed on October 8th at 3 in the morning. I was awakened out of a deep sleep by a knock on my door. It was my parents. They had fled their own home 20 minutes away to come to my home to escape a fire that was bearing down on their home. The fire they were running from was the Nuns Fire. At the time, it would become the 6th most destructive fire in California state history. What they didn't know is they were driving from the Nuns Fire Zone to the Tubbs Fire Zone, which at the time would become the most devastating fire in California state history. I opened that door, unsuspecting and unprepared. My life changed in a moment. And that change, it was fueled out of passion. It was fueled out of things I was prepared for. I'd been pastoring a church in our city of Santa Rosa for 15 years. I'd been actively involved trying to find out how to meet the needs of our community. And by God's grace, I had just enough sense to recognize I couldn't do that alone. So how do we come together? How do we build collaborations that will allow us to rise to the challenges that we face? And so with that in my background, I ran into the mess, taking that same approach that I believe Christ modeled for us. What I quickly understood is that I knew nothing about disaster response. And I'm really grateful that God brought people into my life and into our communities to help us understand that a little bit more. Part of that group for us practically was the Hope Crisis Response Network, who I work closely with now and who are here to be here with the long-term recovery for the CCC. So I want us to understand that long-term recovery is a marathon. And I think this is really important because I remember just how absolutely consuming the need was that we were facing. In our context, we lost 24 lives on the night of October 8th and the morning of October 9th. And we lost about 5,300 homes. I ended up chairing the long-term recovery group for the county of Sonoma. And in that work and with our coalition of congregations helped about 1,500 families on their journey to get home. Long-term recovery is a marathon. And you've probably heard some of these analogies like we're trying to fly the plane and build it at the same time. Have you heard that one? Or we're trying to, get the train going and lay the tracks at the same time. I like to maybe describe it as we've got to help build the course while we're running the marathon. And one of the reasons why I use that analogy spiritual challenges in that framework. And what we're trying to do with long-term recovery is that we're trying to help people navigate this marathon so that they can get home. And we have to understand in this dynamic that, unless you're highly prepared and highly trained, you don't start running a marathon at the pace we started trying to recover from the Eden fire. It's been an all-out sprint for 6 months. And now you got some guy from out of the area telling you, guys, this is a long journey, and we need to start thinking marathon and not sprint. So how do we do that? Because there is still immediate needs that are there, but there's a different approach that's needed to get people the type of help that gets them home. And when we're talking about home, we're not just talking about replacing a structure destroyed by fire. We're talking about helping people move forward into reacquainting with that sense of peace and purpose and meaning, and to be able to chart a course forward. Marathons are tough. There's been studies that have been made. If we can go to the graph, I think it's 2 slides in. There's been studies that have been made around communities like Pasadena, Altadena, this area affected by the Eden fire, in terms of what their community experience is like with disaster. And I'm guessing you can't really read things very clearly here, but you probably see on the graph, starting from the left, just 1 second here. I don't know what's going on, but my life really was impacted, and I'm feeling some stuff here this morning. Just touching this again. Lord, just help me now. Thank you for your patience. On the far left, there's this line that was whatever normal was, and let's be honest, there were a lot of problems before the Eden fire started that we were busy trying to fix. I think one of the great griefs of the work that we were doing in Sonoma County was recognizing that we wanted to fix so many of our fires started on a Sunday. We said we want to fix so many of the Saturday problems as we're trying to do the Sunday work. And so I just want to acknowledge that. What you see as you start at the left there is when the disaster hits, there's an immediate uptick. That's called the heroic response. That is all the beauty of how people came together. That is the walls that came down on behalf of those who were hurting. That is the money that flowed in to meet the need. That is the inspiration and the volunteer spirit and the can-do attitude. In our context, that is Sonoma Strong. In our context, that is statements like the love in the air is thicker than the smoke. And it was real. It was real. And so for about 3 months or so, we knew that we were facing something we had never faced before, but we felt like we had resolve and resource and commitment and collaboration, and we would do it. There was encouragement at every meeting from our local government. There were outside agencies. There was generosity. There were newspaper articles. There was just all the stuff. But then the outside agencies began to leave, and the newspaper articles got a little less frequent, and the funding began to dry up, and people began to move on. And now you see this, what they call this long descent, which is this season of disillusionment. It often goes to the 1-year anniversary, the 1-year marker or so since that disaster. Now, this is not meant to, this is not trying to predict or to put on you anything. I hope Eaton Fire is different. I hope this community is different. I'm so inspired. But you need to know that if you're seeing disillusionment, if you're seeing this downturn in this context, that you are not alone and that is not abnormal. But it's really difficult. See, in this, we begin to understand that those who have suffered as fire survivors and those helping those fire survivors can begin to feel forgotten and falling behind, begin to feel overwhelmed and out of control, begin to start feeling stuck in the process, slowed down in their recovery, and stigmatized in their condition. That begins to turn over a bunch of what I would describe as disillusionment dominoes in the community. Again, I'm not wanting to put this on you in any way, but we begin to see things like just this other sort of collateral issues, like an increase in traffic accidents, because the hypertension type of stuff just had people distracted and unable to do just daily life. We saw heart conditions and high blood pressure situations showing up more in our hospitals. We saw so many fire survivors choose to end their marriages in divorce as a result of the loss of everything and just saying part of starting over means starting over. These were things as clergy we were not prepared for, things we did not think came along with fire recovery. These are the types of things you might already be facing or might be in this season for you. And I'm here not to take away hope, but to say because of hope, because of faith, because of love, I want to be honest with you. I want to say that there's things that we learn, but to understand that it's okay to be honest if you're no longer in the honeymoon period. And if you see those you're working with are no longer in the honeymoon period, because we got to find a way to change the way we're offering help so we can help get people home. I remember when Hope Crisis Response Network first came to me, and they said, you need to start thinking about long-term recovery. That means raise money fast, but spend money slow. Because I didn't understand how much pressure there is from organizations doing disaster relief to spend all the funds that are donated within the first 6 months, or 12 months, or 18 months, when we knew to get people home 36 months from now, we were going to need a lot of money. But that means organizations have to be willing to hold that money for 3 years, and that is a challenge. That takes a different type of vision and partnership. We didn't understand in the framework that there were thresholds to this long-term recovery, like we lost 5,300 homes, but only about 1,000 in our community, only about 1,000 homes could be in the building process at any given time, just based on our community thresholds. So what happens for the people who've been diligent and are ready to move forward, but aren't part of that current 1,000, while they've got all their assisted living expense issues going on and the time is ticking with their insurance provider? How do we deal in these types of frameworks? We need to companion for fire survivors with competence and compassion. If we go to the next slide, to be competent, I'm not defining competence, but I would describe it in one practical way as addressing issues rather than complicating them. See, there's things that we can do in short-term thinking that will actually complicate the long-term recovery of those we're trying to help. And let's be honest, as individual organizations, we don't have necessarily all the competency in ourselves to do the work that's needed for fire survivors. And even if we do, as you know, as fatigue goes up, competence goes down. But there is safety in numbers. There is power in collaboration. And maybe the most important thing that I would say is that the Eaton Fire Zone, this community, needs the clergy community coalition. It needs collaborations like this to be with it for the long haul. Because we not only bring competence in our collective impact, but we bring an opportunity to be a voice for advocacy on behalf of fire survivors. There is power in what we're doing that's so important. I want to move forward because I know that there's some time issues. And so I just wanted to say this as well, that next slide, to be compassionate means to be a practical understanding and consistent presence. This is really tough. As you feel so many in the community, maybe not 6 months in, but I'm just talking about this marathon we got to run. Moving on, as we get less attention, as it takes more work to move people's compassion. Again, I'm not trying to define compassion here, but I want to describe it that it's practical. Practical in a way that it listens well to fire survivors on a consistent basis. One of the things that we did, we had a situation where we ended up with like a FEMA village. I don't think you have that framework here, but it created an opportunity for us to, on a weekly basis, just deliver water to the trailers of some of our most vulnerable fire survivors who are in these FEMA trailers. And the point for us was not the water. The point was to be there listening on a regular basis, to understand what was going on, to understand what they were facing. I am so supportive, encouraged by these grief stations and what's going on here, these contexts to hear, to gather together, and to listen to one another, to do grieving well so we can do healing well. We knew congregations in our community that would hold monthly dinners just for fire survivors to, in a peer-to-peer sort of a way, share where they were in that framework. And I think it's so important. We had schools that created clubs. These were actually student-led clubs of students in the schools who lost their homes in the fire throughout the school year. As you think of this next school year, could just gather together and talk about the journey that they were on. And as we began to listen and understand and hear these elements where they were feeling forgotten, for example, we organized a lunch for them where the firefighters who responded to the fires were serving lunches to the kids who were gathering and going through their process of grieving together. The point is not to take the things that were done in other communities, but that practice of listening and understanding. We learned that those who were living in the trailers, they didn't have a large enough eating area in their trailer to host friends and family for a shared table. They were missing table fellowship. And so we built a fire survivors plaza where they could sit and gather around tables for table fellowship together. What are the practical needs that come alongside as we are helping people chart their course to get home? Before I go to my last slide, I just want to put in a plug here. I know it's probably been talked about a lot at the CCC, but one of the most important ways to offer competent, compassionate care for fire survivors is to have robust disaster case management. I understand that there's a number of organizations who are offering this. This really allows those who are equipped to navigate insurance and FEMA and grant process and the rules and all of those things that are available to come alongside and help fire survivors chart their individual marathon. And as we build a collaboration that works well with disaster case management, we can understand that the precious resources that we have are being most effectively understand the value and importance of partnering well with disaster case management. So I'm actually going to cut my last slide. Sure, I don't have to. We got a minute. Okay. So I can offer more examples, but I just want to encourage us as we're considering maybe the fact that we're in this season, maybe where there's a downward slope of attention, where there's fatigue in the community, maybe we're facing some disillusionment. How do we help people run this race well? How do we provide in a marathon? There are 8 stations. There are hydration stations from mile 2 to mile 26. There are energy stations, where they'll give you, granola, or I don't know, they call it goo or something like that. They help give people energy. There are medical stations. What are the stations that Eaton fire survivors need to help them run this course well as we're companioning them again, not just for help, but to get them home? Because we know that the community, the social fabric of this community, the life of this community needs those who have been displaced, not just to find a place to live, but to find a place to be home, to see their lives woven back into the social fabric of this community in meaningful ways for participation and connection, for belonging and contribution. And so we need to consider with our efforts, with our resources, one is what we're doing meeting actual needs. Those needs may be around mental and emotional health, they may be around spiritual health, they may also have practical components. One of the very significant things we did, it was about 9 months in, is we hosted a shed build. We had a lot of fire survivors who were feeling so stuck in their rebuilding process, they felt like they'd never get home. And they wanted to go to their property, but it was so hard just to see it empty and covered with weeds this long into the process. And they wanted a place where they could store their lawnmower to knock down the weeds, or just keep a chair so they could see the sunset from their property. And so we thought, hey, let's build some sheds. It's going to be a while before they get a permit to get a home, but we could probably get just a little structure that says it's not going to be empty forever. A place where they could store their lawnmower, a place that said work is being done here, we're making progress towards home. We built 100 of them in a day, with 126 churches coming together, over 1,100 volunteers, and with each shed that they built, they knew the name, the general people they were building it for. They got to write prayers and notes of encouragement. Sometimes the homeowners got to come and meet those who were doing that work. I'll never forget a woman who had lost her home. She was a hairdresser. And she shows up, in this big workspace and goes to the shed that's being built for her. And she sees one of her clients has been swinging a hammer on her behalf all day. And they just fall into each other's arms. Friends, it was so healing, so tangible. It meant so much need. It was that pick-me-up that says, okay, I know I'm only at mile 12, but we got this. We're going to keep running. We're going to keep pressing on. We're going to keep moving through. Can we mobilize others to action on behalf of those in need? During this season of disillusionment, you just want to know that you're not alone. How can we do things? How can our collaboration work together in a way that it keeps bringing people together? Can we sustain momentum and visibility for our collaboration? How might what we're doing improve mental health for those involved? One of the things we recognize is, people still, I'm sure from the Eaton Fire, every day those who lost their homes are remembering something that was lost that they hadn't thought of before. And sometimes in the season of disillusionment, it's just that little thing that just feels like the straw that's going to break their back. One of the things we did in the fall is we put on family photo op. We got professional photographers to do family photos because going into Christmas, right? People want to send that family photo, and for many, they recognize, man, we lost all of those photos. It was just a chance to do a day for them to say, here's going to be a fresh start. It was a way of ministering into mental health for the families in that way, boosting morale and advancing purpose. As I was leading our long-term recovery, I had a practice. I'm not saying it's the best practice, but it really came to meet one of my concerns about being able to do this long-term of a marathon. It was to hold people to the purpose of why we're there. There's a story of two masons, two artisans, who were helping build a cathedral that was going to take 100 years to build in the Middle Ages. And a man from a nearby village came by and asked one of them, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm shaping a stone that's going to be part of the wall. And he went to the other and he said, what are you doing? The man was doing the exact same thing as the prior person. But he said, I'm helping to build a cathedral that's going to stand for hundreds of years. In this marathon of work, we need to remember what we're doing, who we're helping, and why. And so it began our gatherings acknowledging the 24 lives that were lost, the 5,300 homes that were destroyed, and the fact that we were gathering not just as a committee, we were gathering for a commitment to help our communities most vulnerable get home. So I want to encourage you for this marathon. Hold to purpose. Center on survivors. Stay grounded